The interesting thing about that interview was that Duncan confirmed some things that we've known, but he really pushed the envelope for me in terms of explaining to me just how far advanced our military-industrial complex actually is. And that kind of fed into the, the ET alien thing, because it's all interconnected. Mm-hmm. I think I've come to believe that a lot of the technology that we have that's been deployed by our military was a result of deals that were made back in the 1950s, and that what we call ETs, these entities, are deploying technology that's, let's just say, not of this world and probably of a satanic origin.
Now, let's go back to the super soldier thing for just a minute. The idea of certainly splitting the personalities of these unfortunate people who've fallen into the grips of these military, these hideous programs, isn't exactly, it's not a theoretical thing. The MK Ultra has really been exposed and wide open, but you're saying they militarized it to the degree that they've reprogrammed personalities and turned these guys into essentially super warriors with abilities that are pretty much beyond the norm?
Superpowers, basically. In fact, what Duncan told me in the interview was that at 14, he was taken into Cambodia, into Southeast Asia, during the Vietnam War. And he was deployed there with a group of, I believe, 12 other similarly aged, he was the oldest, he was the team leader, similarly aged super soldiers who were trained as children. And basically they were, when they were all interconnected, and this is the part that will blow most listeners' minds, they were basically a psychic bomb that was targeted genetically at Asian soldiers. The report from the battlefield, and this was confirmed by officers on the ground, and I've seen the interviews that have been done with corroborating evidence. They took out as many as several hundred Cambodian and Southeast Asian soldiers, Vietnamese, using psychic energy.
Oh man, that's completely out there, isn't it?
This is 1971, yeah. 1970, somewhere around there, yeah?
Yeah, that's going back a few years, so obviously they've progressed the program beyond that, unfortunately. I've been told there's a clip on the internet of another super warrior who apparently manifested some just superhuman strength things that has been seen. There's a couple things going around the internet on this subject, so it's pretty much Exotic. And
yeah.
So
yeah,
you had Ophinian on the air on Exotica then?
Yeah.
Okay.
We did 2 segments with him.
Mm-hmm. What else? Well, now I remember hearing the Norio Hayakawa. Am I saying that right?
Yeah.
The Norio show. That was great. That was a great program. I caught that one.
Norio's an old veteran. He's basically been chasing UFOs since the 1980s, probably further back than that. That was a difficult interview for me because Norio kind of tap danced around some issues that I tried to pin him down on. But I think where he went with this was, in staging the argument, was, no, there's no hard evidence. No, there's no craft on the ground that you can see, touch, or feel. You're not going to see an autopsy, a real autopsy of a dead alien. So what we have right now is basically evidence that's not physically manifested. And I pressed him on this because one of my heart issues is for the abductees, for the people who out there believe that they've been taken by something, and the evidence for that is in tens of thousands of reports that have come in from various abductees whose abduction scenarios are remarkably similar and present evidence. So basically what Norio left us was that this is a extra-dimensional, perhaps even spiritual phenomena that we're dealing with.
Okay. So it's another dimension, which of course is something we've seen a whole lot of in terms of people examining the UFO thing. Gosh, I guess we'll just have to go into some of that maybe in our second segment. I want to stay on the subject of the different guests for just a minute. If you just joined us,
sure.
You're watching you're watching the Stream Wars broadcast, and we have the Exotica host, Randy Moggins from the East Coast, and Randy is interviewing some pretty far out subjects matter on the subject of UFOs and alien abductions and some of the black science and so forth. But I did want to mention, you had Butch Witkowski on too, didn't you? Was that you?
No, that was not me.
That wasn't you. Okay, Butch Witkowski was the guy that he was on one. You've seen him though, right?
Actually, close to me. Yeah.
Yeah, he's somewhere. Somehow I'm associating him with and he was the one who was telling us about quite a bit of the cattle mutilations and that material. I'm sure you've covered some of that as well. Who else have we had on the Exotica broadcast in the last few months that you've managed to bring in?
Another interesting interview that was very recent was author Nick Redfern.
Oh, okay.
And Nick basically covers a pretty wide path in the area of paranormal phenomena. His specialty is cryptozoology. He's covered Bigfoot and various other types of strange creatures. But on this particular show, we brought him in to talk about a group inside the CIA called the Collins Elite. And the Collins Elite basically are a group of people who formed in the government during the 1940s with an understanding at that time that we were dealing with what they believed then to be the extraterrestrials, the aliens, the people from outer space, obviously dovetailing off of Roswell. So what Nick was basically tipped off to by a MUFON investigator, an Anglican priest named Ray Boucher, was that this group had met for, I believe, over 20 years and had basically formed a right-wing religious theocratic group who went directly to the concept that the aliens, the UFOs, the ET apparitions, and all the other paranormal events that were going on were demonic. That would not have been so bad, except that the step further was that they began to set into place plans to establish a right-wing theocracy within the government of the United States. Basically a lockdown under biblical, what we would call Old Testament, or perhaps even the Noahide laws. This group was discovered in the government. They've been in the government. They had a strong presence during the presidencies of George W. Bush, George H.W. Bush, and predominantly heavy during the Reagan administration as well. These were actually insiders who were providing covert intelligence to administrative and congressional overseers.
Man, that's very interesting. I've noticed a great deal of, I'm going to say, UFO interest among, I'm going to be careful how I say this, a lot of the people engaged in alternative media, theoretically those guys who are doing Christian work, but where they have a lot of fascination and a great deal of interest in the Nephilim and in some of the black science things. But they tend to be, there seems to be common denominators in their theological perspective. Now, you and I both know that, the Bible prophecy side of it, there's really a couple of camps, and they're not real compatible. So it's very interesting to hear you say that, because here you have a whole faction in government that had a distinctive connection with a supernatural, admittedly angelic source. Maybe you can elaborate on that a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, basically they tapped into a lot of information dealing with the demonic, and that would be fine. I think you and I have both done enough pursuit into this area of inquiry, certainly in terms of ET extraterrestrials and then the spiritual warfare side of things, which has to do with demonology, which has to do with deliverance ministry and things like that. The problem is in government, we lack substantial disclosure right now. I know that's a buzzword, but it's the best word I can come up with, about the events that have occurred. Turning this over to the theocrats who have predicated their entire, how do I want to say this, they predicated their entire approach on a very strict evangelical bent, can lead to some danger. We have this as well right now in Roswell. We have a group of people down there who go to Roswell and basically minister as Christian ministers out of Roswell as well. And that would not be an issue either, except that they hold to certain beliefs that predispose them to believe certain things. My approach to this, if I can just kind of explain maybe where I'm coming from, my approach to this has not been theological. In interviewing people, and there's more coming, we're going to do some abductees, I've got some other people lined up I want to talk to. A theological approach can be useful, but I think in doing exotic and talking to the people that I've talked to, like Duncan O'Finian, it's more useful to listen to what they're telling you and not color it.
That's a whole lot of... Randy, I'm going to ask you to hold that thought, because I think we've got a break coming up right here on at the bottom of the... Well, it's not even really the bottom of the hour, is it? But it is a break, and you are watching the Stream Wars broadcast. I'm James Lloyd, your host. My very special guest is Randy Moggins of the Exotica broadcast, which is on the V channel. We'll tell you a little bit more about that when we come back. But stay tuned. We'll be right back with more on Stream Wars.